The next section we'll cover is an attempt to develop a communication model for supervision. And I'm sure that many of its elements will be familiar to those who have actually undergone supervision or are supervisors. When it comes to developing a communication model for supervision, the first thing we need to do is to identify the major stakeholder groups, and we've got two of them at least, I think. The first group is obvious. It's all the individuals and units at the university that are directly or indirectly involved in the candidature. And this group will include the supervision team and the immediate support staff, heads of postgraduate studies, heads of schools, school research directors, and so on. And we can arrange these subgroups into a series of rings. Those with close and immediate contact are located closest to the candidate. So we can visualise it like this: the HDR candidate in the centre of this bowl, and surrounding them are an increasingly larger number of stakeholder groups. But as we develop this sort of bowl shape, the groups that are closest to the HDR candidate are going to have the most impact, and that sort of dies away as we move further away from that candidate. So in effect, we have a supervision team, which will involve the principal supervisors and co-supervisors. We'll have support staff, which are administrative staff and technical support staff. A ring outside of that is a head of postgraduate studies. That could be a head of school research director. The labels will be different, but the importance or significance of each of these groups to the candidate will probably be as it's drawn here. Faculties usually have some kind of associate dean research, and they have within their research unit a HDR coordinator of some kind. They have less direct involvement with the HDR candidate, but tend to signal important institutional events for the candidate and the supervising team. For example, when annual progress reviews are due, when the research review is imminent, and so on. Beyond the faculty, we have university units, such as the Research Student Office or Graduate Research School. These are involved in enrolment and examination processes, so they don't have frequent contact with a HDR candidate. For that, it's a supervision team and the support staff, technical support staff and administrative support staff. There's a second group which are incredibly important as well, and these are the family, if you like, the ones that are immediately supporting, perhaps financially, certainly emotionally, the HDR candidate. Outside of that familial relationships, there's financial and work arrangements, and outside of that, often candidature requirements, visa constraints, and so on from the government. So we have family, financial, and governmental, perhaps, requirements that impact on the supervision. So what? What can we do with this? So these two stakeholder groups can be thought of as rubber, and at times various circumstances mean that there's pressure directly applied, squeezed onto that HDR candidate that sits between this sort of institutional requirements and maybe familial requirements. And these contexts are dynamic, so we can imagine these bowls as representing different stakeholder groups moving in and out of the context of candidature, different kinds of problems influencing when and whether a student can continue their candidature. Each of these stakeholders are bound to the candidate and ongoing supervision through these completed acts of communication or texts that constitute the supervision, the supervisory work processes and practices. So, for example, at the beginning of the enrolment process, we'll have, for example, a business research proposal subject for the student to enrol in, and so on. So we begin to appreciate how complex the supervisory process actually is. It's remarkable that it gets done. And you can consider, for example, that each of these rings generates at various times throughout the candidature particular kinds of chains of communication. So, for example, we can have one chain for an overseas student that may involve a visa issue that the candidate has to clean up. That may involve resolving aspects of work. There may need to be communication to supervisors about what's happening in the student's visa arrangements. The supervision team may subsequently alert the HDR coordination at a faculty level, and so on. So these situations involve completed acts of communication that move between these different stakeholder groups, these different kinds of supervisory contexts.